going on, guys? So this was meant to be in the last video, but those engine mounts ended up taking a real long time to sort out. So this time we are going to be looking at the absolute headache, the bane of my life that has been drive shafts, which means only one thing. It means CV boots, CV grease, which is just the worst stuff ever created. It gets everywhere and is sticky. This is my least favourite bit so far. We're going to pull apart all of the CVs. I'm going to run through what I've tried to this point, because I've been battling this for a little while, and then we're going to look at how we're planning to solve this now and how we might solve it longer term if this doesn't work or fails at some point. So I think without further ado, it's all down here, so I'll get it laid out and we'll have a bit of a better look. This is the current collection. There's a few other bits that maybe we'll have a look at, but this is all we really need to know. On this side of the room we have Celica shafts. So this one is for the right hand side and it's a two-piece shaft, and this one, which has been fully disassembled now, is for the left hand side, and it's just a single piece shaft. On this side of the room, in this corner, this fighter, we have the Yaris shafts. A little rundown of what the actual issue is. So the best way to look at this is like this. As you can now see, that end of the shaft is about lined up, about the same length. This end is a different length. This shaft is longer, not by a huge amount, but just enough to be, I think, well, I know it wouldn't work. So you'd have to lop off a bit. It's too long. That is issue numero uno. Just as a side note, if we actually look at the other side though, the shafts are actually, this one's shorter. The next issue we have, and we'll look at it on this shaft because it's easy. That probably doesn't show up too well, but that spline and that spline are not the same. And at this end, that spline and that spline are not the same. That is further compounded by the fact that this is a Yaris CV and this is a Celica CV. And again, I don't think it shows up fantastically, but that spline is different to that spline, and vice versa. This is the inner CV. We have covered this previously, but that spline is not the same as that spline on the gearbox side of the Yaris. So basically, none of the splines line up with each other. You can't swap any of the CVs between shafts, so it's not like you could run the Yaris shaft with the gearbox end of the Celica shaft. There is no combination of these that you can get to work together. I scoured the internet for hours, actual hours and hours, trying to find a CV that would spline onto the Yaris drive shaft, to absolutely no avail. I then bought this, which is a later generation Yaris lower arm, because I was told that that fitted. And to go with that, buried under these gross CV boots in amongst all this other crap, is a Mark II Yaris hub. Now, the Yaris hub actually takes the Celica CV spline. It doesn't bolt into the suspension strut on the Yaris though, which is not the end of the world. You could modify that to fit, but who knows. The bigger issue is that that lower arm did not fit that subframe. The idea with the lower arm was it made the track wider, as did the hub, and then you could just run both of the Celica shafts and all would be well. I have been told that on the MR2 this shaft is slightly shorter, and as a result you can put an MR2 shaft on here which will mate with the Celica box. You can then run this Celica drive shaft, and if you get some Corolla hubs, I believe, allegedly, they bolt straight in and they retain the 4 stud pattern, whereas the Celica hubs are 5 stud, which is bad. We don't want that. However, that is not the solution that we are currently aiming for. What we are currently going to do, I shall get my little sketch pad out and we'll have a little sketcheroo. So bear with 2 seconds while I go and get that, because I'm disorganised, and we'll have a little draw, little sketch, and it'll be fun. Now, here we go, my best artistic skills. So the plan is, at this end, we are going to have a Yaris hub. This is a terrible drawing. Anyway, this is a Yaris oh my gosh, Yaris hub. There. At this end, depending on which item we're looking at, we're going to have the Celica interface. So that will be either the gearbox or it will be the CV that's on that 2-piece drive shaft that we looked at a minute ago. I can't spell or write. Now, the issue we have at the moment is that we have a drive shaft which will fit this, and we have a drive shaft that will fit this, but we don't have a drive shaft that will fit both. So here we have a Celica inner CV, and here we have a Yaris outer CV. What we're going to do is we're going to take the drive shaft of the Celica, like so, and we're going to cut it there. And guess what? We're going to take the drive shaft from here and we're going to cut that like that. So now we have 2 half drive shafts, which is no use to anyone. But this is where it gets a bit sketchy, kind of. What I'm going to do is on the Celica side, initially, this is, imagine this is zoomed in, so we'll go to there. I'm going to put it in a lathe, and I'm going to turn onto that shaft a taper of about 45 degrees. At the end of that taper, I'm actually going to put a little dowel like that, so it's got a bit of a dowel pin to it. On this side, on the Yaris, we're going to take that shaft, it's actually a slightly smaller diameter, and we're going to do that. Then we're going to put the taper on, same as that one, but on this side we're going to drill into the shaft, and we're going to drill a hole which is pretty much exactly the size of that dowel, and we're then going to slot that into there so that it holds itself true. I will hold both ends of the shaft in the lathe, hopefully, and then we will weld it together, and we can build up the weld into this V groove as they go together, and we'll build up a really nice, strong, hopefully, bond. Loads of heat, big TIG welder. Once that is done, like I said, this is slightly bigger than this. We will then run the lathe, and it will just skim the top off the weld, and we'll run the lathe just slightly over to that, and it will take off a bit of that material. So this and this to this point are uniform, and then I'm going to slide over the top of that a sleeve, basically a bit of tube, which will sit over that, all the way over, and right over the joint and the weld. And then I'll run a bead of weld around each end of the sleeve, and that means if this joint fails, because drive shafts are designed to have some twist in them, and the welded joint isn't ideal for that, but it means if it does fail, hopefully all that will happen is I'll lose drive, and this sleeve that's over it, held in place, should stop the eventuality of a flailing shaft wiping everything out around it, because that would be less than ideal. So that is the plan. That allows us to set the length, retain the Yaris track width, retain all of the Yaris front end, run a Yaris CV in the Yaris hub, and mate to the Celica box. So what I'm going to do, I've drawn out a little table here. We'll have a look at it over there in a sec. All I need to do is measure, basically work out the length at full droop on the suspension and when the wishbone is level, and that gives me the longest and the shortest eventuality of the drive shaft. And we'll go through how we're going to work that out in a mo. If that fails, then we'll have to get some Corolla hubs and some MR2 drive shafts and see if that works. But for now, this is the plan, and that is how we are going to progress this here video. So let's get measuring, and then we'll go and get making. And just like that, I have all the bare shafts I need. So the two Celica ones there, the big long Yaris one, and the two Yaris ones, but that's the non-mullered one because it's got all the breakers writing on it. Now the Yaris CVs outers are just a monumental pain in the backside, I find. The Celica ones were dreamy, and the Yaris ones were not, but I did find there's a really useful tool that you can use to get rid of them. So that gets rid of them pretty well. I'm not sure if that's how you're meant to do it. Pretty sure that doesn't say it in the Haynes manual, but online everyone just seems to suggest that you buy whole new drive shafts, but that doesn't work for what we want to do. If we go back and look at our pretty pictures, I think I mentioned this in the last bit. I've got my left, I've got my right, and it's measured. I'm going to measure the internal depth of both of the CVs. Then with the wishbone level jacked, so that should be the shortest that the drive shaft's ever going to be when the wishbone's level, and then once it goes past level it gets longer, and once it droops past level it gets longer. So I'm going to get the length. I'm going to take the length from there to there, and then from the back of the CV to the back of the CV, and I'm going to do the same thing on full droop for the left and right, and that tells me basically the shaft has to be quite a bit longer than that, but cannot be longer than that, otherwise it will bottom out or it will pop out. I've also got spline lengths defined here, and yeah, from all of that we should be able to work it out. And last talky bit before we start the doughy bit. Got the measurements. There's absolutely sod all really in it, like a couple of mil between this in the suspension travel, which is quite nice. I guess there's not masses of travel on it, to be honest. There'll probably be even less potentially if I do some thick suspension mods and get it slammed, but slammed to a good level, not a ridiculously low level. But anywho, basically all I've done is taken this length and then I've added the splines on. Once you've got the splines on, this CV is stationary and the splines really do sit flush with the back. So you just add that spline on there, and then I just rounded it up slightly with it by a couple of mil. I might take that to 360 to be honest, but there's no way it can come out, and it's going to be sat about halfway in there all the time, which is about where it wants to be. So without further ado, we're going to go on a little journey and visit a man with a lathe who's very kindly offered to give me a hand, and have a look at actually making them as described. So let's go. So first and foremost, huge thanks to Mark for helping me out with this, absolute lifesaver. Obviously I couldn't have done this without him, but looking at this you can see we've got the shaft shoved together now and it's connected, it's pinned and doweled, it's nice and true, we've checked that, all is looking good. Now we just need to run some beads of weld in the joint there, all done. Everything will be good, hopefully it will stay true. Let's crack on. So next step is going to be to take these here shafts that we've got now, see, nicely welded together, and it actually worked out pretty perfectly with the Yaris and the Celica shafts, that by selecting the right ones, there's a slight step on that, see, where the thicknesses, but the thicknesses are almost identical, which is nice, and they're welded up, got a good few beads of TIG in there. And the next step is going to be, I've actually just got to get turned a sleeve, so I shall be sleeving over the joint, and I'll put a bird's mouth on the end of each of the sleeves, because that stops you getting that single plane of heat affected area, so it should make it a nice bit stronger. But I need to get them turned, so we shall have a little look in a later video at just welding them on. The key thing now though is to check that they fit, because with this one in particular, me being the muppet that I am, I referred to the wrong number when I started cutting them apart, and so it was actually, I think, 30 or 40 mil shorter than I'd calculated it needed to be. Luckily you regained 10 mil, and fingers crossed it's going to be just long enough, as long as it doesn't pop out, and ideally the little circlip that sits inside the inner CV, as long as that retains and it doesn't pop past that, at full lock and full droop, we're all good. I've got some shiny new CVs for it, for the outers, and all we need to do is pop off the snap ring for the outer CVs, and then we can slide those on and off easily, and we don't have to repeat the issues we had before. So for mocking up, we'll take no circlips, no snap rings, and we'll just put the shaft together, go drop them in the car, and then we'll rotate the wheel round at full droop and just make sure that nothing pops out. So I'm going to get nice and greasy again, putting these ends back together. It's actually a bit of a bugger. Get them slotted on, and then we'll take a look at them in the car. So be right back. Well, don't know how well this shows up. It's very dark under here. But that's one, and that one sits in there. So that's the one that we did right, and that sits in there, friggin' absolutely perfect. Get right in there. Low light, see it sitting in, not too deep, not too shallow, and that's it's just nice. Goes well. Shafts are nice and straight as well, which is always good. This side, however, this is the one that we got slightly wrong, and when the gearbox isn't in the way, you can just see, again, I don't actually think it's a problem, but it's close, and that wasn't actually all the way in, so that's all the way home now, and it is close to the edge. I think probably the camera makes it look slightly worse than it is. It is in there, and you can kind of see where the snap ring goes. Obviously I'm not on full lock at the moment, so we shall go and wind that on now quick. Still in there, still enough room for the retaining ring, I think, so happy days. And we'll double check the other side, but obviously given that that was already looking better, yeah, so that was the sort of ideal scenario, but there's not a huge amount in it, probably like 10 mil in the overall length of the shaft. You see, just to be sure, fine again. And this is when this side's probably all popped out. I didn't hear ball bearings flying everywhere, so there you go. Again, close, but all good. So assuming that that does actually all work, we're pretty golden now. So yeah, drive shafts. Like I say, we're going to sleeve them, and I'll boot them, etc. at a later date, once everything else is done. But that was another episode. I don't know if you've seen that. Let's get it out of the way just in case. That was another episode done. I hope you enjoyed it. Bit different, and this is probably, you know, this is the least DIY bit of the whole project. As you can tell, we need a lathe. Like I say, there's potentially you can use an MR2 drive shaft and Corolla hubs. It just gives you the slightly shorter track width. If these do fail, which I don't think they should, I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me otherwise, but I don't think they should, then that would be the route that I have to investigate. But yeah, we'll sleeve them, get everything finalised, at a later date. So for this episode, that's all. I need to take my glove off for the special clap. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscribe. We're getting pretty close to having this mechanically wrapped up. I'm still battling with the wiring. There might be a small hiatus in videos. Who knows? We'll have to kind of wrap everything up, but we shall see. I think next week we're going to start doing some miscellaneous bits. So there's still 2 engine mounts to be done. One of them involved fabricating quite a lot of the front of the car. We need to get the exhaust to line up. So I need to make a little bit of downpipe down here. Gonna have to start butchering that to try and get that in place and make an exhaust system link up with what's already in the car. So we're looking at that, and just lots and lots of little bits that we'll look at. And I think, you know, we're not necessarily just going to have one big project per video. Maybe it'll be more interesting. Anyway, give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscribe, and until next week, take care of yourselves.